Hello students, you might have heard a prominent news coming up between the war of Hindenburg and the Adani group. So what is it all about? So basically it is the war between these two companies. Adani Group is of India and Hindenburg is a research company which operates in America. Okay, so Hindenburg Group has claimed that Adani Group is doing very, suspicious activities. It is doing many of the transactions which are fake in nature. And this time, this is the second time the Hindenburg has come up with a new story which is saying that it has filed a case upon the Adani Group and the SEBI as well. This time, the SEBI has also come under the radar of the Hindenburg, where Hindenburg is saying that SEBI is helping out Adani Group in doing all these fake transactions. So what is it all about? So let's study the basic structure of a company. How does a company starts? How and what is the role of SEBI? So SEBI is basically, the full form of SEBI is Securities Exchange Board of India. So basically, Securities Exchange Board of India is the watchdog. Now, what is the meaning of a watchdog? Exchange Board of India. So actually, what is the meaning of a watchdog? Watchdog means a person, a company or an association which looks after the companies so that the money invested by the public in the company not gets misused or unutilized. Okay, this is being checked by the SEBI as a regulator. Okay, now what happens is a company, if a person wants to open a company, so there are two types of companies. The first one is the private limited company, private limited. The second one is the public limited company. Now the question arises, what is the meaning of private limited and a public limited company? So basically what happens, private limited company is a company with less or limited number of owners or the shareholders. Is that clear? This company will have limited number of shareholders or the owners of this company. Now the public limited company will have the n number, that is infinite number of shareholders or the owners. Now what is the meaning of this thing? What is the main difference? Suppose what happens if I want to start a company with approximately 2 to 3 persons. So I can start a company by opening a partnership business. But if I require a large amount of capital, so I open up a company that is a private limited company with 3 to 4 owners only. If I want to invest more amount, if I am in a need of more capital, so I will go for a public limited company where I, along with the 4 owners, will allow the public as well to invest in my company. So this is the basic difference between the private limited company and a public limited company. Private limited has limited owners and public limited might have n number of owners because the real owners, the real management is totally different from the owners of the company. Okay, so here we can have many of the owners, many of the shareholders who have their holding in the company. Okay, next, apart from that, if a company needs to be started, so first of all, the company needs to get itself registered with the Companies Act 2013. So it has to be registered with Companies Act 2013, earlier which was 1956. So earlier this act was 1956, now it has become 2013. Is that clear? If anyone wants to open up a company, it will have to register it with Companies Act 2013, and there are different offices in different states. For example, if I talk about Madhya Pradesh, So in MP, Madhya Pradesh, the registration office is in Gwalior. So this registration office is known as the ROC. So what is ROC? ROC is basically the registrar of companies. For example, would have seen, or if anyone wants to buy a house, if at all, if you want to buy a house for rupees say 50 lakhs, for rupees 50 lakhs. So apart from the buying the house, you will also have to pay an amount of registration, which in a layman language, we call it as registry. If you have heard this, so we will have to pay a registry amount, which is approximately 10% of the actual value of your house. So if the value of your house is 50 lakhs, so you will have to pay 5 lakhs to the government to get the house registered in the books of the government as per your name. Okay, so ultimately the price of this house will be 55 lakhs. Okay, so you will have to pay out 50 lakhs for the house and 5 lakhs for the registration charges, which will be paid to the government. So this is the scenario of the house when we purchase the house. Now, you might also have purchased the vehicle, or you might have seen the purchasing of vehicle where suppose the price of the car which you have purchased is rupees 10 lakhs. So this time also you will have to pay two more amounts. So what are those two amounts? So it is, first is the insurance amount which you pay. Next is the RTO. If you have heard about this, that is the registration charges, with which you get the unique number for that vehicle. So you might have seen MP04, DL05, so these MH07. So these are basically the numbers which you receive after you get your vehicle registered with the RTO, that is the registration office. Okay, so again, for purchasing a vehicle of rupees 10 lakhs, you will have to pay out approximately 50,000 for the insurance of that vehicle and 50,000 for the registration charges. So ultimately, you will have to pay out an amount of 11 lakhs in order to purchase a car of 10 lakhs. So that's why you could have heard the word, this is the ex-showroom price and this is the on-road price. Same is the scenario with the company as well. If at all you want to register, you want to start a company, you also need to register this company under the Companies Act 2013 at the ROC. Okay, now the question arises, obviously, if you were purchasing the house for rupees 50 lakhs, so we were paying an amount of registration charges that was of 10%. That was charged on the price of that house. Second, when we were purchasing the car, we were paying out the registration charges as an RTO expense to the government for the same, which was charged on the price of that particular car. Now the question arises, what amount will an ROC charge when we start a business? What is the amount? What is the value of the business? Exactly correct. The value of the business is determined by the capital you will be investing in the business. The capital which will be invested in the business plays an important role on deciding the registration charges. So in total, there are three types of capitals. So the first type of capital is known as the authorized capital. The first type of capital is known as the authorized capital. The second type is known as the issued capital. The third type of capital is known as the subscribed capital. So these are mainly the three types of capital. So it is basically, this is second and this is the third one. Okay, now the question arises, what is the meaning of authorized capital? Look, what happens whenever you will go to the ROC will ask, what is the meaning of ROC? ROC is basically the registrar of companies. So registrar of companies, the registrar sitting there will ask you, what is the maximum amount you will be investing in this company in your lifetime? So isn't it a weird question? How can we say that we will be investing this much amount in the company? Does the Reliance company knew that they will be investing crores of rupees in the business? Not at all. It totally depends upon demand and supply and the growth of the business. So it was a confusing question. So we asked the registrar, how can we define the amount of the company, amount invested in the company beforehand only? So they told us that what is the amount you will be investing in the company in a year or two. So this was the good question, where example, we told the registrar that we would be investing a rupees 10 lakhs into the business. So this 10 lakhs is basically the authorized capital. This is the maximum limit set by the ROC and the company's owner, that we, the owners, will not invest more than 10 lakhs into the business. Is that clear? So authorized capital is basically the maximum limit of money which can be invested in the company. Okay, so the next question is it the amount which has been invested in the business? No, not at all. This is not the amount which has been invested. It is the amount which can be invested. Okay, this is not the actual amount which has been invested already, but it might be invested. This is the maximum limit. You cannot invest more than 10 lakhs into the business. Now, there was one more question. If at all, in the future, if we want to increase our capital, so what will we do? Then the registrar of the company said, then you can increase the capital to whatever amount you want. Then you will have to give an application letter. Then we will check that and we will see that if the company is doing good or not, then we will sanction it and you can increase the capital to whatever amount you want. So again, there will be a re-registration of your company. Okay. Is that clear? So this was basically the meaning of authorized capital. That is a maximum limit which can be invested into the company. Next is the issued capital. Now, what is the meaning of issued capital? Obviously, a company is mainly started so that we can get the public's money into our business, so that the public, general public, can invest the amount into our business so that we can have a lots and lots of capital. Done? So issued capital is basically the amount of capital which we issue to the public. So it is basically the company has now been registered to invest a maximum capital of 10 lakhs. Company thought that for the time being, for a year or two, they only require a capital of rupees 6 lakhs. So what did the company do is, company advertised in the newspapers and everywhere that they want 6 lakhs as a capital. Those of whosoever be the public who wants to invest in the business can apply for the shares and we will give you the shares. Then you will be known as the shareholders or the owners of that particular company. Okay, so what happens is, whenever we go to the ROC asks for the authorized capital. Now, after telling them the authorized capital of 10 lakhs, they ask that what will be the amount of the per share, what will be the amount for per share, and how many shares will there be. Okay, these are the two questions which are asked by the ROC. The first question is the per share price. The second is the number of shares. So suppose I'm taking an example. Suppose this 10 lakhs division is, I told ROC that I will have 1 lakh shares. I will have 1 lakh shares at the rate 10 each. So there will be 1 lakh shares in my company and the price of one share will be rupees 10. So this is how the 10 lakhs is completed. Now, if I want to invest 6 lakhs, so I will have to issue 60,000 shares in the market. So I will issue 60,000 shares. I will issue 60,000 shares in the market. This phenomena of issuing the shares in the market is known as IPO, which stands for Initial Public Offer, where company directly offers the shares to the public. Usually what happens, the shares, once the company has sold the shares, next time, if at all a shareholder, a person wants to buy a share, he will ask from the other shareholder. The company had the shares which have now been sold off. So the company does not have the shares anymore. Afterwards, the shareholders among themselves sell and purchase the shares, where we see in this trading share market that the price of this share is going up, the price of this share is going down, depending upon the demand and supply of that particular share. As you can see that the price of the Adani Group's shares has fallen down drastically because of this Hindenburg report. Okay, so it is basically the company issued how many shares to the public? 60,000 shares. So this issuing of shares is done by bringing out the IPO, which is initial public offering, where first time the company is directly offering the shares to the shareholders, to the general public. Okay, so this was the issued capital. Now, this is totally not possible that all the shares might get subscribed. So the last is your subscribed capital. The meaning of subscribed capital is the number of shares actually purchased or actually subscribed by the public. So in subscribed capital, there can be three of the scenarios. The first scenario can be the company had put 60,000 shares for sale. Now the company might receive the application of full 60,000 shares, or else the company might also receive less, that is only 55,000 shares, or else the company might receive 70,000 shares application. So all the three possibilities are there. So the first one is known as the undersubscription. The first one is known as the undersubscription, where less public applied for the shares. Next is the 60,000, which simply says the full subscription, which is known as the fully subscribed. The last one is the 70,000 shares, which simply means that oversubscription. There is an oversubscription of the shares. Okay, these are the three types of subscribed capital, where the public can demand for the full shares, or else they can purchase the less shares, or they can purchase the more shares. They can demand for the more shares as well, because they have to send the application letter that I, so and so person, wants to buy 5,000 shares, I want to buy 8,000 shares, 12,000 shares, depending upon the need of that shareholder. Okay, so this is how we get the applications, and then after getting the applications, we allot the shares to the respective shareholders. Just remember one thing, there is a minimum subscription clause. There is a minimum subscription clause which says that minimum 90% of the shares should get subscribed. Minimum 90% of the shares should get subscribed by the public. For example, in our case, we have issued how many shares? We have issued 60,000 shares for public. Now, the 90% of 60,000 will give you 54,000 shares. So, the Companies Act, the ROC says that if at all you are issuing the shares, so there should be a minimum subscription of, that is, the public should subscribe a minimum of 90% shares. That is, your shares which are getting sold off should be sold at least 90%. Why is it so? Because this, as I told you, the SEBI is the watchdog. SEBI takes care of the amount invested by the public into the business. So if at all the public is not willing to purchase the shares, that simply means the public is not trusting the company. So if at all the 90% shares are not being subscribed, so the company will have to return the amount back to the shareholders from whom the amount had come, if it is less than 90%. If it is less than 90% within a fortnight, that is within 14 to 15 days. Okay, this is the meaning of minimum subscription clause, which says minimum 90% of the shares should get subscribed. So that's why I have taken three values. This is 55,000, which is more than 90%. Okay, so this scenario is known as undersubscription, fully subscribed, and oversubscription. Next, after that, the company's shares can be sold in two ways. The first one is the par. Par simply means selling the share of rupees 10 for rupees 10. The next is the premium, that is selling the share of rupees 10 for rupees 12, that is more than the actual value of that share. So rupees 10 here denotes the face value. This particular thing is known as the face value or the nominal value. Apart from that, the price at which the company is issuing the shares, that is the company might issue the shares at rupees 10, that is the face value itself, or else at more than the face value. The amount which is more than the face value, that is rupees 12, is known as the issue price. This thing, rupees 12, is known as the issue price, where 2 rupees is being charged as a premium. Now the question arises, why does the company sells for rupees 12? Because there might be much demand of the shares of that company, or else there is a very goodwill of this company in the market. So that's why they are charging 2 rupees extra per share. Okay, so this is the two scenarios. Share can be sold at par or else at a premium. Next, now just before this we studied that there are 3 types of subscriptions. Okay, the first one was under subscription, the second one was the fully subscribed, the third is the oversubscribed. The question arises, if at all there is a oversubscription, so what happens when we actually don't have so many shares and the applications we have received is far more than the actual number of shares issued to the public? So there can be 2 scenarios. For example, the company had issued 60,000 shares and the public has subscribed for 70,000 shares. So obviously we have 10,000 shares in excess. We have received extra application for 10,000 shares. This is the excess shares. Now 2 things can happen. Obviously, we do not have 70,000 shares, so we will not be able to give more than 60,000 shares. So the 10,000 shares for which we have received the money, either we will reject the amount, we will reject the application and we will refund the amount. The first scenario is to reject and refund the amount which we have received on application. Next is the second one is the reject and adjust. Now, what is the meaning of reject and adjust? Now, just see a scenario. For example, there is a person who has applied for, so let me show you example, like there was a first person who came up who wanted 10,000 shares. So obviously we had 10,000 shares earlier, so we gave him 10,000. This is basically applied, that is public applied for 10,000 and we allotted 10,000 shares. So suppose he was Mr. A who applied for 10,000 and we allotted him 10,000 because we had 10,000. Next, a person came up with 20,000. So yes, we do have 60,000 shares of which we have allotted 10,000. So we have a balance of 50,000 shares. So we gave him 20,000 shares. Next person came up with 30,000 shares application. So we gave him 30,000 shares. Now we are over with the shares. Now we do not have any more shares. Suppose there is a person D who came up and asked for 10,000 shares. So we simply rejected and we told him that we do not have extra shares. All the shares have been already allotted to the public on a first come first serve basis. So you can't be allotted any more shares because we do not have the shares. So this was the first scenario where we have rejected and we will refund the amount he has paid on the shares of 10,000. Okay, this was the first scenario. The second scenario can be, there comes a person C. He demanded 40,000 shares. Now tell me what will happen. The first person came and we allotted him 10,000 shares. Second person 20,000 shares. Now we are left with only 30,000 shares because we had how many shares with us? 60,000. Of 60,000 we have already allotted 30,000 shares. Now we only have 30,000 shares remaining with us. And a person C has come up demanding 40,000 shares. So this time we will give him only 30,000 shares. And this particular phenomena of giving less shares is known as reject and adjust. This is only known as the pro rata allotment. So we will ask him that you have paid the amount to us on 40,000 shares, but we have allotted you only 30,000 shares. So you should have paid the amount on 30,000 shares. 10,000 shares amount is extra with us. So we will adjust this amount in the next installment, because the shares are sold in an installment basis, where the person has to pay the first installment, second installment, and the third installment as well. So we will ask him to pay the balance amount in the next installment after deducting the amount which he has already paid at the time of applying for the shares. Is that clear? So this particular phenomena is known as pro rata, where we adjust the shares, we adjust the amount which he has paid in excess. Okay, so pro rata means allotting the shares on a proportionate basis, on a particular ratio basis. This was the summary of how a company starts, and apart from that, if there are more subscriptions, so how does a company allots the shares, where we studied the two types. The first one is known as the reject and refund. We simply refund the amount. The second is the pro rata allotment. I hope this was very much easy, and now it has become very clear to you. Thank you so much.